Hello, 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 everyone. I'm Jeanette Lenoir with E Pluribus America, back again with another great show and a fantastic guest. We have Dr. Nayana Rasayon here with us. He is a behavioral neuroscientist and associate professor at the University of the District of Columbia. Dr. Rasayan, thank you so much for joining me today.
I'm absolutely honored to be here, and I feel pleased to share my few drops of water that come from the ocean that I do not own.
And on that note, I think that's such a wonderful thing that you're doing because even in the Bible, it says that to covet knowledge is a sin. So the fact that you're so humble to understand the power of your knowledge and to readily share it really means a lot. So thank you so much.
Well, I'm honored that you have that perception, but water comes through the garden hose, but the garden hose does not own the water. So I'm just a vessel, and I'm glad to be here.
Well, thank you so much, because a lot of folks don't think like that. So, but before we get started, can you tell folks a little bit about you? I think you're such a fascinating person. I had the pleasure of hearing you speak at IKG Wisdom Wednesday, and you talked so eloquently about our connection to technology and how it impacts people, especially African Americans. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I think I'll encapsulate it this way. Um, my father was what you would refer to as an engineer and a priest, but because he didn't have the letters behind his name, he was referred to as a radio man when he was in the U.S. military. I use that as a foundation because in traditional Western education, people are trained to start off talking about who they admire and who they studied and things like that. So the essence of what I'm about to tell you is all of my training came from HBCUs, with the exception of a peekaboo request from the University of South Carolina in Columbia in the late 70s. Of course, I wasn't going to go to Gamecock country in South Carolina. So I went to North Carolina A&T in Greensboro, North Carolina. I had a concentration in biology and psychology. I left North Carolina A&T and I went to Fisk University, Meharry Medical College program in clinical community psychology because it was a joint program that dealt a little bit with neuroscience. Neuroscience wasn't that well clarified at the time. And then I moved from there to Howard University and I received my first doctoral degree at Howard University on what would be called neuropsychology, neuroscience. And I've had opportunities to teach in the US Pentagon through a community college connection. And I've had an opportunity to do presentations abroad. And my primary focus is on the relationship of human information processing to dealing with the system of racism and white supremacy and the accepted pathology of Eurocentric training in traditional education systems. And in a nutshell, that's basically who I am. And beyond that, we can I play percussion and I do a lot of spoken word. And I'm the father of some wonderful human offspring. That's it.
I, you know, the energies the waves must have known you were going to show up. So please excuse the technical difficulties there, but please go on.
Well, I don't talk a lot about myself because, as I shared with you before, I mean, in traditional African society, I should have asked anyone in your audience, older, but your platform isn't set up that way. You don't really speak until you get permission from the elders. And in traditional Western societies, they usually go to books and quote people. But in traditional African society, Asian societies, you always go to the elders because they are the walking archives. So I believe that what I'm inclined to share with you is beyond what I would like to have formally prepared. And it will be improvisationally shared with you based upon what we identify as needs. But being a behavioral neuroscientist means that you are a little bit other than a psychologist and you focus on things other than pathology. You literally focus on how the human brain interacts with the human heart and navigates an environment. And that's the essence of how humans govern their behavior prior to technology taking over, prior to propaganda taking over, and prior to people using food and things that you need to manipulate and guide your behaviors. And in a nutshell, that's one of the reasons why when Ajwa asked me to speak, I shared with her that, it's great you guys want to talk about AI, artificial intelligence, because that's what we now have to navigate, because the last frontier the Eurocentric scientists are trying to control literally is the human brain. And even though I admit it reluctantly, they are doing a phenomenal job at it at this very moment as we speak. So, again, as I shared with you before, when people want to know a little bit about my person, I do better when people ask me and pinpoint me, because the archive where my vessel pulls knowledge from, I would never entertain the thought of trying to claim it, because it is that vast, it is that large, and it is what it is.
Yeah. One of the studies that you conducted at Howard University was about the brain waves of African American men. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, I see you've done a peekaboo in a number of things. In a nutshell, I actually did. I'm going to say this with humility, but at the time when I did it, I don't think there ever had been one done before. I think I actually did the premier study that dealt with cortical activation processing among healthy African Americans, because Eurocentric models typically deal with pathology. They look at what's wrong, like what's dementia, Alzheimer's, substance abuse. So I wanted to look at information processing among quote unquote normal people of color. And so when I
Hmm.
did that study at Howard University, we actually had to go down to the sociology department to crunch my data, because the psychology department at that time, the computers were not sophisticated or fast enough to crunch the data that I had. So, in summary, that study dealt with how the human brain encodes information that are basically embedded in boring information, information that captures your attention, like music with thematic content,
Hmm.
information that dealt literally with science, and then information that dealt with rhyme and reason. And what we found, because I was originally trying to look at the classic stereotype of left brain, right brain functioning, we
Hmm.
found that information encoded by the human brain was directly related to relevance. And what we used was something called alpha attenuation. It's like I'm talking now, so your brain is probably in beta, which means I'm talking, I'm stimulating your eardrums, so you have to encode the information. But when you're chilling and just relaxing, you're in alpha. And alpha is a little bit like this. And contrary to popular belief, the brain rhythm and the resonance of the brain is identical to the rhythm and resonance of the earth. It's called Schumann resonance. So what I looked at was, how does the brain process information in people that are mainstream thinkers, who are called convergers, and how does the brain approach information among people who are divergers, who are people that think like the stereotypical quote unquote people of color? They told us we thought right brain. Follow me? Because we're more improvisational and interacting in our learning. And what we found was that brown people, black people, we are whole brain. All right. We do a peekaboo at the relevance of the information, which you might say is kind of like leaning from the left side encoding. And then we accentuate it with how the right side finds relevance in it. So when I was looking at left brain, right brain functioning, what I actually found was we are whole brain oriented. And that was a very challenging study to do. And I must admit, Howard had me jumping through all types of hoops before I did it,
Hmm.
because I had another variable that I had built into that I wasn't even able to analyze. I was looking at lifestyle, dietary practices, and they told me to sit on that data because that was too much data to put in the computers that we had running at that time. And later I found that that's also a factor. What is your lifestyle like in terms of nutrition habits, and how do you take care of yourself, all those types of things. So that's an encapsulation of what that study was about. And the findings in a nutshell literally pointed out that people of color collectively, we do encode and process information in a way that significantly differs from our Eurocentric vanilla brothers and sisters.
That's Now I find that so interesting. Now, do you think that is based on, um, what has happened to us through our journey from Africa, the Middle Passage, and the history of slavery? Like, why are our brains wired differently? Certainly, environment, indoctrination, and trauma. changes the way our brains function and even how our culture interacts with one another. Um, why would you think that it is so for brown and black people, or specifically these young men at Howard University?
Well, I wasn't just, okay, in a nutshell, socialization is always a factor. How do you approach learning? But when you just keep it real and call it what it is, melanin dominant people, i.e., brown and black people, our system has, you might say, it would be what you would refer to in the old days as FM. We're on a different frequency than our vanilla brothers and sisters. You may not know the brother's name was Bill Russell. When he started playing basketball in the NBA,
Hmm.
vanilla brothers were telling him you can only play defense sort of like on a very, very horizontal plane. You approach the guy, you block him, you keep it on the court. But Bill
Hmm.
took it to the sky. You follow me? And
Hmm.
Pele did the same thing with soccer. So, other than our brains literally being wired differently, the way our brains talk to our neuromelanin and the melanin in our skin, it accentuates how we can tune in to a variety of kinesthetic levels of engagement. How we move, how we do things. And you probably know, I don't know where you attended school, but you can just look at cheerleaders from mainstream European high schools and colleges and look at cheerleaders from African-American and HBCUs, and you find they have a totally different rhythm about how they engage the information in those environments. And that rhythm translates into a class of staccatic movements that oftentimes they cannot be duplicated. They can only be improvised based upon what they decided to do. Are you following me? And melanin is a key element in that. And as a matter of fact, a few decades ago, there was a vanilla brother by the name of Jimmy the Greek. He got in some serious trouble because he made a comment about running backs or guys in the NFL. They could do things differently because they were a different kind of person. But
Hmm.
those things were not put in context. And vanilla people in their dichotomous thinking, to quote my brother, Dr. Edwin Nichols, it's either right or it's wrong. And even though Jimmy the Greek was plugging into a stereotype, his foundation has some accuracy, even though the actual words did not do justice to what he wanted to communicate. People of color have a different rhythm. No matter how you want to talk about it, they have a different rhythm. And that rhythm translates into how the nervous system responds to environmental stimuli. And that's a fact. That's not my opinion.
And that's used against us. I mean, so far in human history, it's our uniqueness, so to speak, has always been used against us. So um, I just find
Well, let
that
me
so.
let me excuse me to interrupt, but let me accentuate that. And when you say it's used against us, it's turned into a negative. You see,
Yeah.
this society um, normalizes pathology. It normalizes pathology with such a frequency that when people see something that's clearly wrong and absolutely disconnected from nature, we say ignorant stuff like everybody does it,
Hmm.
or it's in vogue, or it's the current zeitgeist. Like the current zeitgeist now is to tell people lies on the internet, and real information they'll tell you is fake news, and then information that's deceptive and propaganda, they'll put fact checkers in place to corroborate stuff that's not accurate. Then you have to check the fact checkers and find out who hired them. So that's the world that you live in. And to a great degree, um, algorithms work that way. But in terms of melanin, it's just a neurobiological fact. There are some fundamental differences between melanin dominant people and melanin recessive people. And as Dr. Frances Wilson would often say, she would suggest very candidly that our vanilla brothers and sisters were basically expressing a form of albinism.
That's interesting. With so much controversy surrounding the topic of melanin, because there are certain people who would be seen as extreme if they go too much into all the different roles melanin plays. Um, why hasn't there been more studies done on it? Why isn't this whole role of melanin taken more seriously, especially now that it plays such an important role in AI, in technology, which has completely immersed, is such a big part of our lives. But yeah, we never really talk about melanin except for kind of as a way that makes it seem divisive or somewhat controversial. But why is that when there's so much science behind melanin that needs to be uncovered and talked about?
Well, let me share it with you this way. I have a colleague, Dr. Timothy Moore. He travels a lot. Tim does a lot of research on melanin. And prior to him crossing over, he did a tremendous amount of research. Brother Laila Africa. I
Mhm.
mentioned these two brothers, and Dr. Moore is still on the planet. I make this comment to give you context for it. You ask, why is that? Your eyes are not able to encode information if it wasn't for the retina in the back of your eye, which talks to a superhighway that leads to your brain, which has a special relationship with your pineal gland. It's called the optic chiasma, all right? And there's a lot of jargon relating to the brain that we can talk about, but I don't want to, convolute the conversation with that jargon. But that relationship that the optic chiasma has with the pineal gland is directly related to light darkness cycles. And so you ask, why is it controversial? And why is it oftentimes sort of like neglected? The irony of it is it's not neglected at all. It's just that they put it in our face in plain sight, but they usually cloak it in journals that the average person is not going to read. And they also oftentimes mask simplicity in language that the average person cannot encode. For example, a cousin in the world of synthetic intelligence that's directly related to neuromelanin would be the cousin that they use coltan for to make your cell phones and your smart cars be able to talk to each other without using the internet. That's the same technology that black people and brown people use that we call vibing, communicating without speaking, intuition. And that's lined up with the level of resonance between your pineal gland and your heart and how your eyes encode information. Because your heart has a neural network in it that's comparable to the network that's in your brain. And that relationship is so sophisticated that Europeans haven't figured out how to control it yet. They have figured out ways to do a peekaboo measurement, but because they have not figured out ways to control it, they have yet to talk about it on a broader scale. Other than telling you about your smartphones, you need this and that to make these kind of computer chips. And they use coltan to do that for these smart cars and all these types of things. But you have it inside of your head. It's in your pineal gland. Your pineal gland regulates everything in your body. Your pineal gland tells your pituitary gland what to do. Your pineal gland will tell you that when you've flown 8,000 nautical miles on the planet, that your body has to reacclimate to the rhythm of the sun and the moon in that environment called the circadian rhythm. So they know, and they also use language now that does not relate specifically to eumelanin, pheomelanin, and neuromelanin. They even have a synthetic form of melanins now because they're trying to figure out how to duplicate natural melanin so that they can control a number of other things. And I mean this literally, and you can easily find it online if you do what I call a cross search. You're not able to just use one search engine because it's usually embedded and nested in things. So the bottom line is melanin is to humans what chlorophyll is to plants. And chlorophyll to plants is what humans must have in order to navigate this planet because they purify the air and make the air oxygenated for us to actually inhale. So the relationship, when I made a comment about Schumann resonance, the planet actually has a rhythm that's literally, and the irony of it is the human brain rhythm mimics the rhythm of the earth. But we don't talk about that because we're usually trained in silos. And when you get trained in silos, people that know neurobiology don't get a chance to talk with psychologists and sociologists. And the language keeps us from talking to each other because they lock us into journals and we only talk to our peers. And so we stay ignorant in our own little arena of our discipline.
Right. I'd like to play a short video, which kind of delves into the pathology that you talk about. So if you can bear with me 1 second, please, I will play it.
I think we have like 7 incarnations of female energy and 5 incarnations of male energy that make up the dozen. And as you know, I'm going to amplify everything around identity. And there was a protocol that Europeans put in place, though it was pathological. And I'm sure you've heard the expression before, cheaper by the dozen. But it did not mean cheaper by the dozen. It meant cheaper when you buy a other, because their call was to hide any perceived flaws that we had as a group. And I'm going to try my best to amplify the significance of identity relative to the absolutely essential and natural relationship of the yin and the yang, all right, or the so-called androgyny of male energy and female energy, that we are basically extensions of each other. So when you talk about us collectively, we need to avoid dichotomizing who we are and realize that we all operate out of the resonance of mirror neurons, and we connect with each other, which essentially summarizes that everything in Eurocentric psychology is built upon a Eurocentric paradigm, which by its very nature is designed to marginalize melanin dominant people on the planet.
So I wanted to uh, to highlight those pieces because I think it's somewhat of the foundation of your teaching, which is about identity, who owns the identity, the pathology, who controls the identity, and basically the need to change it, especially as we're advancing into a technological age. Um, so I just kind of wanted to talk to you more about the the identity part of it, and how do we as Black people coexist in this world that we have to face, which is a world that's dominated by white supremacy, or we live in a white supremacist dominant world. So, and as we advance with technology, how do we navigate that? How do we coexist with that harsh truth? Um, Especially if we all want this better world, but yet we don't really even control our identity. Um, can you talk a little bit about that and where we go from there?
That's mind blowing. You actually, is my audio coming in okay?
Yes.
That's mind blowing. Even though you put that brother in front of me that my person walks around this planet in every day carrying. Um, Identity. The phenomenal thing about identity is, I'll use this as a springboard. I made a comment in one of those videos about androgynous beings.
Hmm.
Humans oftentimes are oblivious to the fact that prior to Europeans ripping the planet off of the fundamental truth about male and female energy, um, there was not a dichotomy of dealing with energy as male and female energy other than the principle associated with the Netru in ancient Kemet, which was electric and magnetic. And by nature, male energy in men is electric, and by nature, energy in females is magnetic, which means they pull. The universe knows. As a matter of fact, the zeros and the ones in computer code is also related to on and off, or pushing and pulling. But the identity component, for particularly for people of color, prior to about 20 years ago to 25 years ago, a lot of brown brothers and sisters that speak Spanish that were from Mexico, even some of the brothers from Puerto Rico, and a few people that were not necessarily the brothers and sisters from Brazil because they spoke Portuguese. But the Latino brothers would say to you things like, I'm Hispanic. And I have to tease them and say Hispanic means little Spain, which translates into your identity is usually lost when people colonize you and take your language. You follow me? And
Hmm.
so with African people, a melanin dominant people that live in the US, most of them oftentimes they think that their lineage is tied to the passage or the Ma'afa.
Hmm.
And the reality is there were a lot of First Nation people here prior to Christopher Columbus getting lost. And those First Nation people, they had a number of names, oftentimes associated with the Algonquin or derivations of the First Nation people that Hollywood told us were Indians, which we summarily used because Hollywood had put in front of us people like John Wayne and told us, you know, you had these little fights with cowboys and Indians. And a number of those people were as brown as I am. You
Hmm.
follow me? Because they were First Nation people. So with that labeling and that identity thing, the colonizers had the resourcefulness and the pathological nefarious goals of separating all of these people into what they later summarily told us were tribes. And then they fed the story of tribalism, of them fighting each other. They did the same thing about continental Africa. So when you look at the core of your identity, you in an essence, let me tell you what a human is. I usually tell my students this. You're probably gonna have to tune in and listen because I may have to give you two variants of it. A human is a hydrocolloidal, carbon-based photobioelectromagnetic transducer, aerobic type life form. All right, you're hydrocolloidal. All right, carbon-based life form, photobioelectromagnetic transducer. You feel me? And intelligence is the ability of an organism to maintain a homeostatic state in a given environment without disrupting ecological equilibrium while functioning optimally. So intelligence is the ability of an organism to maintain a homeostatic state in a given environment while functioning optimally without disrupting ecological equilibrium, which means that by nature, First Nation people, Black people, melanin dominant people, they had a special relationship with the earth, nature. You follow me? And the Kemetic symbol for nature in ancient Egypt looked like a little staff with a little flag on the pole, which is sort of like a hatchet, okay? Similar to a tomahawk. But that neter represented all of the attributes of nature. And so vanilla people said that these people, they don't worship God. They believe in polytheism. They have all these different quote unquote gods. But the Native Americans and Africans said we're recognizing the attributes of God. So what Europeans did was we need to rename these people. And in renaming these people, we can rip your identity away from you and put you in little isolated categories. And so when you do that, fundamental to doing that was to take your name, because your name represented the vibration that your parents and the elders knew to capture the energy of the spirit that came to the planet, again, in the form of what humans always say, regardless of language, enfant or baby. And ba, or baby, really means literally when the spirit manifests, or the spirit has come back to the earth, and the spirit usually comes through where the spirit always comes prior to us having technology, comes through the womb of a woman. And so built into a woman is the total ability to name everything, i.e., man is quote unquote after woman, i.e., male is after female. You follow me? But because these misogynist, nefarious vanilla brothers struggling with their epigenetic signature from the Ice Age wanted to subordinate women. Matter of fact, women were not even recognized as like persons in the United States until I think 1929 or 1903. Are you following me? So identity is critical to that because identity is the essence of your entity manifesting in this domain. And so the way to control the people was we need to rename these beings. And Black people weren't even identified as people because they had a what, 3/5 clause, and you were not a whole human. You follow me? So when you rename something, you can control it because you force them to respond to whatever it is that you call them. And AI is that dangerous because they have labeled a number of things relating to melanin dominant people as being prone to engage in criminal behavior or nefarious behaviors. And when you program those computers with that type of code, the algorithm is going to generate a response set that leads to an outcome that will invariably, almost exclusively, always identify what's done by brown and Black people as to either have a criminal nature. And the last comment I want to make about that in terms of identity is prior to the mid 90s or early 90s, anytime someone had a quote unquote substance abuse problem or related to alcoholism in particular or drugs, they would say that person is an addict or they're prone to engage in criminal behavior. But when vanilla brothers and sisters started doing that stuff on a serious tip, they immediately reclassified it as a disease and a medical condition. So identity is related to labeling. And when you label something, you can control it because you force people to look at whatever you've labeled or whatever that term is that you've attached to those people.
It feels that this road has been so long and arduous as far as this devaluing us as human beings. I mean, that started way back. That's what really, I believe, normalized slavery was our dehumanization. We've talked about this, we've studied this, it's been written about, and yet here we are in a modern era, and it's a different kind of slavery, many would say. because of technology, because of algorithms, and how technology negatively and disproportionately impacts Black and Brown people. What can we do to protect our spaces in AI? What can we do to protect our identity? What can we do to even monetize our identity? Because even if you look at fashion and cultural appropriation, so a lot of content creators or people who use technology to try to make a living or making a living, you always hear how you know Black and brown people always get the shorter end of the stick. So with all that we know, why are we still in this space of neglect and abuse? Why is it so comfortable to continue to say that yes, these are all the figures, these are all the numbers, Black people continue to suffer, and with all the information we have, we're still not making inroads. How do we make inroads? How do we get to the other side of what we know is?
That's a profound question, and it's loaded with a lot of elements. I don't know if you saw the recently released movie about the Dahomey warriors. I think it was called Woman King or something like that.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. Well, and you saw the king finally saying to his general, the woman king,
Hmm.
she had basically defied what he had asked her to do, and she went out and did what she intuitively felt that she needed to do regarding her daughter. And then later he recognized her as the woman king. What I'm getting at is, what can we do? Um, but remember, that movie was revolving around her pointing out that we need to own ourselves and not sell ourselves to other people, and don't plug into doing that. The challenge is we look to entertainers and artists for direction. And the reason why we look to entertainers and artists for direction is because they are the ones that are usually given center stage. And when they're given center stage, they're given a mic, and that mic allows them to amplify their message, though it may be pathology. And that center stage light shines on them. And that's
Hmm.
what's paraded around the world to represent us. You follow me? And so when the real scientists behind the scene, they are also compromised because traditional academia reinforces brown and black people to duplicate whatever Eurocentric journals want them to say. Otherwise, they don't get published. Otherwise, they don't get recognized by their peers. And when that happens, we basically are on a very, very unique trajectory of undermining our own integrity by waiting for other people to say that what we're doing is worthwhile. Are you following me? Like you
Yeah.
take Martin was taken off the planet when he was 39. Malcolm was taken off the planet when he was 39. Patrice Lumumba was taken off the planet when he was 35.
Hmm.
37. Medgar Evers was taken off the planet. He was 35 or 37. So before you get into your 40s, and 40 represents your foundation is clear about what you're supposed to do in this incarnation, Europeans would take you from the planet. And I brought that up to talk about what do we do. We have to start elevating our own people. We have to start doing our own research. We have to start supporting each other. We have to start listening to people to say, you know what, if it's white flour, if it's white sugar, if it's white milk, all right, if it's white rice, it's not good for you, because it's basically a cocktail for diabetes. But what we do is we listen to people that get the most visibility in the media. And oftentimes, the people that get the most visibility in the media have either been purchased or propped up by the media to take care of their nefarious agenda. It's a reason why, within about every 400 to 500 meters in major urban environments, you find a liquor store and a church. It's a reason why you aren't able to find a real supermarket or store where people can buy fresh produce unless they go on the other side of like about 2 kilometers or like a mile and a third. It's a reason why that's in place. And that's in place to keep people from having the proper nourishment that they need. So, what we need to do is we need to start reinvesting in each other, believing in each other, and amplifying each other and acknowledging each other. And when you see a person of color, you won't look at that person with a scowl of disapproval or wondering if you're in harm's way. You will greet that person. You will greet that person and acknowledge that that person is an extension of you. And so Eurocentric values are designed to do two fundamental things: undermine your sense of identity by fostering a false percept of who you are in essence and how other people perceive you. And secondly, control all of your resources so you will not invest in yourself to identify who you really are. And it's a system. That's why it's called a system of racism and white supremacy. It does not mean that vanilla brothers and sisters are supreme. It means that they control the venues or the platforms to propagate the deceptive information that fuels the pathology.
You know, when you talk about us supporting each other and looking out for each other, I mean, we can just look across American culture and see what an impact Black folks have made in American culture. They are American culture in many ways. When you look at our entertainment and our innovation and whatnot, all the different things that Black folks are responsible for. But yet we're still talking about us supporting one another. Why do you think that there's still a divide? Because some of us have certainly made it. We've had a first Black president. We've had great strides and great forward movement, but we're still talking about the need to support one another. Why are we missing that? If we have a different kind of brain where we have the ability to use all of our brain, the whole of our brain, why are we still lacking that fundamental piece that makes it innate that we support one another?
It's one word, and that one word creates a cluster of other words related to that one word. And that one word is emotion. And
Mm.
contrary to popular belief, emotion literally means to move something. But at the end of the word emote is a morpheme or a phoneme called ions. And so when people can get you to emote, they can control you. As a matter of fact, some of the most sophisticated individuals that were agents in intelligence all over the world, Soviet Union, Israel, Italy, and the United States, they were called like a honey drop. They used women. They used relationships. They used the epitome of all human emotions, so-called love. And of course,
Mhm.
they use hate because that's sort of like the inverse of the absolute opposite of loving someone. But the hate is a component of ignorance. So you ask, why is that? Because we are by nature a very, very emotional people. And that means that we pick up the rhythm of energy on a regular basis. You made a did a peekaboo vignette of something that I had made a reference to called mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are in your brain. And like, if you see something that's sad, you won't even realize, but before you know it, you feel sad. If you see something where someone is like laughing and chuckling, you have no idea what the joke was, but you find yourself chuckling and smiling because there's a level of resonance and activation in your brain that engages what's called mirror neurons. And when I tell you, my vanilla brothers and sisters, they are good at this. All right. And what they do is, you want to know why we're in this situation, is because there's another word that's absolutely totally related to emotion. And if you look up the etymology of this word, you would be clearly aware of what I'm talking about. The word religion comes from religar, religare, which means to bind. And what those big time ministers do in these mega churches, they crawl out the woodwork and tell you they're preaching the gospel of prosperity. You follow me? And people will tithe as well as make large donations to these people. And these people in these mega churches, rarely do you find these people in these mega churches getting together and talk about what they can do on a grand scale for all people of color. They usually are comparing their clothing, their cars, and their congregations and how much visibility they have. And that's why I made a comment a little while ago about the woman king. When the king said, "You didn't do what I asked you to do, but you definitely are taking care of our people." These people have lost their way. And it's because they have lost their way, their children lose their way. And when their children lose their way, they do all types of things. And when vanilla people see your kids have lost their way, that's an opportunity for them to come in and stir up the chaos, redirect what they pay attention to online, further fragment their identity, and exploit the isolated pockets of people that have what we perceive as talent. And they'll take our talented people, repackage them, oftentimes create narratives for them and put that back in the community. And then we will follow. Like my jokes are always, have you ever seen Stevie Wonder driving a Maybach? Have you ever seen Stevie Wonder driving a Rolls Royce? Stevie Wonder has someone driving for him because Stevie Wonder knows that he sees music, but he cannot see the freeway or the people in front of the car. So my point is, you have the blind leading the blind. And like we spend time talking about what Kanye West is doing, how he's changed his name. I mean, because we are an emotional people, and that's how the internet gets you on these loops and cyberspace with these algorithms. They'll find things that you pay attention to that you swear you don't, but the technology will track how long you stayed there, and it will track how long you stayed in a particular place looking at something similar to that. So the next time you go online, you will see a trail like the yellow brick road in the Wizard of Oz, and there will be signage all along the yellow brick road of all those things that you say you don't notice. But the internet has created a meta tagging, and it will pull up those things that it recognized that you spent time noticing that you claim you were not noticing. And then you would be in that labyrinth going through that maze. And at the end of that maze would be the outcome of that algorithm, which means we want you to stop here. If you're not going to purchase, you can put it in the cart. And if you're not going to purchase what you put in the cart, the algorithm will send you a reminder to your email address. And so they do that to commandeer our identity. And we don't even know we've basically been possessed by the traffic cops in cyberspace, who are basically like digital troopers. And they monitor everything that we do. And they control us. And so people that are in academia, we go, hey, I got to get paid. Hey, I got to get tenured. Hey, I got to get more money. I got to move from a professor to professor emeritus. Hey, I got to get more visibility. And that becomes a myopic vision of what education literally meant. It meant to bring out and to liberate. So you had the blind leading the blind. Like I say, you don't see Stevie Wonder driving.
Boy, you're right. That is pretty profound. I want to play another video, but I kind of want to preface it by saying it's almost like they're using us against us, our own information against us to keep us trapped in this loop, or try to figure out our way through the labyrinth of technology. But I want to play another really quick video just to talk a little bit about coding and our role in technology.
Oh, that's funny. Recognize.
If you're trying to design a model, right, and you want that model to be fair, you want that model to treat likes alike and not discriminate, not exercise bias. In the case of race, for example, do you design that model to be aware of race, or do you design that model to be unaware of race? Some would argue, right, that by designing the model so that it's unaware of race, you end up, right, not recreating, right, the kinds of racial biases that we've become accustomed to, right, historically and even contemporarily. But others would argue, right, the exact reverse. And that is, if you don't explicitly recognize race, you end up sort of recognizing race via proxy, right? So if your model is looking at other kinds of data, looking at other kinds of information, zip code, school, your financial situation, all of those things in some ways, right, can be a reflection of or a proxy of one's racial identity, class perspective. And so in that sense, the idea, right, is that even when you're not explicitly thinking about race, race implicitly makes its way into these systems in ways that we simply have to understand.
I want to show you
Systems in ways that we simply have to understand.
do you know this? What do you think about this person? Are you familiar with who this person is? Well, this character, Shooter Graham.
That's not in my data file. Go ahead.
Did you know that this is not a real person?
It's an algorithm. It's created by, it's like the advanced form of what Python has put in place.
Yeah.
Because they found a number of, Python is actually a kind of protocol that they use to write algorithms and put things together for people that may not know. But in a nutshell, we can go a step further. Have you seen the one where they have taken Morgan Freeman and they have Morgan Freeman doing a number of things, but it's not Morgan Freeman, it's actually an algorithm, and Morgan
Yes.
Freeman is talking and they're using his mannerisms. But see, this is
Yeah.
how they program you. But the subliminal message behind this particular imagery generated by AI is it is the epitome of a highly melanated human. But when you
Mhm.
look at this, you have, I can show you one that I have over here. Well, I don't have to show it to you. What they do is they take those things that a lot of us have looked at a particular way and they create a composite of it. And the algorithms, the AI will create the imagery. And when you see it, back to what I was sharing, you won't know what's real. So they will create a pseudo reality for you and project that pseudo reality on your reality. And you will be in a maze and you will not be able to differentiate. Remember, I made a comment a little while ago about the yellow brick road. And I said, you're looking at
Right.
all this signage and it's guiding you somewhere. Imagine you seeing this composite of a human and not know that this particular composite of a human is actually generated by a set of algorithms or AI. But let's say you're a guy that claims that
Mhm.
you would like a lady that's really dark, all right? But the red lips symbolizes passion and a number of other things. But
Mhm.
you don't want people to know that you're attracted to that. So what they will do is you will see silhouettes of her popping up along your cyber highway on a regular basis. And in
Mhm.
so doing, you may find something on the other end that's the actual outcome that they want you to pursue. They may be trying to get you to buy or get a video game with this particular character in it, and you'll find yourself purchasing it because that's what the algorithm does. It guides you to a particular outcome because the algorithm becomes a recipe for the artificial intelligence to create a product on the end, and you plug into and you're doing it, but you don't know why, and you wouldn't even be able to phantom like, is she real? Is this real? And they have
Mhm.
I don't want to say mannequins, but cyborgs like this in major places in Japan, and you're actually interacting with a cyborg unit. And if you don't get close and pay attention, you may not realize that this is a cyborg unit. But when it says to you, hey, konnichiwa, Dr. Rasayon, your room
Yeah.
is ready. Your favorite vegan dishes are upstairs waiting for you. And now they've distracted you from looking at the cyborg unit, and you're like, damn, she knows what I like to eat. Damn, it's already in my room. Damn,
Mhm.
this is fascinating. And then when you get to your room, someone comes up to your room and say, oh, we may have forgotten that you also like no monograms on your towels. And you're like, damn, this is a really fascinating place. And so before you leave, you may find yourself spending a lot more money than you would have ordinarily spent. You follow what I'm saying? So they plug that into your psyche and they appeal to your emotions. And this is designed to appeal to a person's lower chakras, your solar plexus chakra, your sacral chakra, and your base Muladhara chakra.
Mhm.
And it'll get you because
Yeah.
black absorbs all light and that red pushes things out. But if you notice very carefully, you see a little nuance of the whiteness of her teeth, which means that her mouth can be opened. You follow me? Because
Mm.
you don't know that you're looking at a cybernetic unit, but she's sitting there. I'm not sitting there. She's postured there, and she
Yeah.
has her hands over her head, which means she's waiting for something. You follow me? And whatever that is depends upon what's in your head or whatever data they've collected from you about what she may like or what you like your women to do and or whatever you're into.
One of the controversies about this particular computer generated image is because it was
Hmm.
created by
Hmm.
a so-called white influencer.
Hmm.
And so it brings up the whole issue of, wait a second, so white white people can create these black images and make money off of them, which creates a whole other avenue of discontent where people are saying this is cultural appropriation. White people or other race of people shouldn't be able to create this type of computer generated image, because this image is a black woman, is of a black woman, even though it's not a real image, it's not a real person. But the fact that it was created by a white person creates a problem. What are your thoughts on that?
Remember when I think when I did my presentation for Tony Browder's group on
Mhm.
IKG, we are not writing our own code. But the truth of the matter is, some of us are writing the code, but we're getting paid to write the code. And as we remember, I made a comment earlier about the woman king and that she had
That's right.
defied the king's logic. But he said, basically, we still have to look out for the people.
Mhm.
We lost our way. And you lose your way when you don't have anyone to give you guidance. But you also lose your way when you don't have contingencies and penalties in place for selling other people out. And that's by design. That's the nature of capitalism, to exploit. And it's beyond the fact that a Caucasian person could have been behind the actual imagery, because the Caucasian person actually collects data from what brown and black people like to create that type of imagery. And beyond that, you also have to look at the pathology behind it. There's two levels of pathology. One, they can get an insane amount of money over it. Two, they have the ability to play God. I created this image of this black woman. Look what I did. Look how much money I'm getting from it. And I didn't even talk to one black person about it. And because the internet has all of these ambiguous guidelines and rules that vary from state to state and country to country, by the time we catch up with some type of contingencies or penalties for it, it would have already done its damage. Things like this, we need to speak up about. Now, let me say something else. You just shared that image. I'm sure you've seen a lot of imagery about African-American women, but they take away the brownness of their skin and they make them fairer. Or they may take away from the coarseness of their hair. Sometimes they even thin their lips, but they may make Angelina Jolie's lips a lot bigger. And they may take someone like one of the Kardashians and exaggerate her derriere and make it more pronounced than it actually is, artificially is, right? So what they do is they program the people. Your brain encodes that information like it's real. And as a result of your brain encoding that information like it's real, your brain is unable to differentiate what is real or what's not. I made a metaphor when my presentation was being done with Tony and his crew at IKG. They pull you into a cul-de-sac. And when they pull you into the cul-de-sac, it's difficult for you to turn around. And so when you get in the cul-de-sac, you may find yourself in a loop. But while you're in the loop, there's a lot of animation going on in that cul-de-sac. So you may slowly move in that cul-de-sac. But by the time you find your way out of that cul-de-sac, which simply means just turn around, but they may crowd you in the cul-de-sac. So you have to do a number of things to get out of the cul-de-sac. So by the time you leave, I've already fed you a series of algorithms to take you in the direction that I want you to go when you leave the cul-de-sac. Are you following me? And so when that happens, your brain is in a maze, but that maze translates into what's emotionally appealing to you. So what do we do about it? We start demanding and holding people accountable. And the way we do that is we're not able to just sit back and pumped up and have a conversation. You write letters. You send letters to your representatives, and you get other people to send letters. And you have forums in your churches. You demand that these ministers in these mega churches are accountable. You demand that they speak about some things that are going to relate to health and empowering the people in the community rather than increasing the size of your congregation. You demand that, and you will not get it if you don't demand that, because we are a people that we are completely fascinated with outlets for our emotions. That's why I made a comment a little while ago. Liquor stores and churches pepper environments where you find people of color, and you don't find comprehensive food stores where you can get what you need. So if I control your food, I can control how you think. And if I control how you handle stress, I can control how the pathology will continue to rise in your community. For example, the liquor stores, the availability of legal marijuana. No one likes to be stressed out. Everyone likes to feel good. And so what we do is we commandeer your brain and make you think that you just made a decision.
Wow. Yeah. But, I feel like I think sometimes it's too big to fail. We've gone too long without adequately addressing this as a real wound for Black and Brown people. But technology keeps pushing ahead. I mean, it touches every single part of our lives. And even though we contribute so much to it culturally and otherwise, we're still not in those spaces that help shape it.
May I suggest, please don't forget your question. Two things we can do about it.
Hmm.
We can actually communicate and collaborate with people that we recognize that may know a little bit more or know something different than what we know, number one, and don't just ostracize them. Two, in doing so, we can make a special effort to
Hmm.
pay attention to what we put in our bodies. And that doesn't just mean food and water. It means, what are you listening to? What are you reading? What types of video games are you choosing for your children? What types of movies are you watching or binging on when you have time? I'll just be quiet and allow you to share your comment. And for the record, this is a non-alcoholic beer, all right?
Oh,
But it's
which kind? Which kind is
and
that?
so I'm just popping it up so that I can quench. It's called an Erdinger or Erdinger, right? It's non-alcoholic and
Okay.
it's completely zero content. But every now and then I'll pop one and I'm talking and I just
No
want to
judgment
move forward,
here.
you know.
No judgment here. Um, uh, Dr. Rayasan, can you talk a little bit about brain waves and what what role it plays in advancing technology? One of the things that you mentioned during your speech earlier this week was how dangerous our phones are in our beds or anywhere near our bodies when we're sleeping, because of all these different gamma rays and rays that are constantly floating around us. Can you talk about that a little bit?
You know what? I don't want to sound selfish, but at some point in the future, maybe you can invite me back and I will give you a presentation on that because
I would love to. I would
it's
love that.
layered, but let me share with you in general. Um, I'm not going to quote the sister's name now because I don't want to take it out of context. She's a vanilla sister and she does a tremendous amount of research and she doesn't do it on her own. That's why I say invite me back and I'll expand on it in detail. What happens in particular, like when you put your phone, like if you're utilizing your GPS in your phone, or if you are spending a lot of time on your phone, like kids, they text a lot, which is actually better. But if you're in bed with your phone, falling asleep on your phone, or like some people carry their phone around their crotch, some people carry their phone, and a lot of cultures, women put their phone in their bosom. People would put their phone beneath their pillow or near their bed at night. They wake up with their phone. And if you notice how bright the light is from your phone, so your phone is actually communicating with pulse waves of electromagnetism. And those pulse waves of electromagnetism are deleterious to your physical body. And that's why I said if you give me an opportunity, I will share with you the imagery and the graphics that were highlighted about what happens when people hold their cell phones to their ear, what happens when they carry their cell phones in their pocket, what happens when they leave their phone on accidentally. You know, like if you're using your GPS, you may have to turn your GPS off completely. Otherwise, it'll still be running in the background behind another app on your phone, which means it's pulling that signal. And if you also note that your phone will heat up. Now,
Yeah.
most people don't realize that the pulse of the communication signature of your phone is similar to the pulse and communication signature of your microwave. It's just a lower dosage of it, right? And because it's on and off, or it's pulsing so that it can maintain the connection with the cell phone tower, and the cell phone tower is talking to a satellite. So what happens is that pulse of electromagnetism is corrosive to your body. And because it's corrosive to your body, it does cellular damage. But because it does it so insidiously and it does it at such uh, a long, it has sort of like a cumulative effect that you don't know it has done damage until years later. And the young lady, or the vanilla sister that I'm talking about, when she actually presented this information, I would say 7 to 10 years ago, she wasn't able to present it in the United States. She had
Mhm.
to go to Australia to present it, outside of the United States, because big phone companies, and if you get on the metro, people that you wonder can afford to do anything in particular, 95% of them have a smartphone. You follow
Mhm.
what I'm saying? But they
Yeah.
may only use it for like maybe emailing or going online, Instagram or something like that, or sharing pictures or playing music. But those phones, if you keep them on all the time, and if you're sleeping with them, they are doing damage to your body. And I'm diplomatically not talking about a specific type of damage, other than they create an atmosphere in your body conducive for oncologists to really want to study you. And oncologists, they study cancers, a variety of
Yeah.
different types of cancers. So I would definitely recommend that you keep your phone at least 3 meters away from you when you fall asleep, that you actually go into your phone, turn your phone off and turn it back on if you use your GPS. And if you've been in an environment where you've been on the phone and you had your phone to your ear, I would suggest that you get some buds or something to use and not keep that phone near your ear. Because if you recall, it was just over 15 years ago when about 85% of all cell phones had an antenna that you pulled out of the phone to pick
Yeah.
up the signal. Now the antenna is embedded in the phone. And a lot of that is directly related to the compound that I mentioned to you a little while ago called coltan. And coltan is almost like a synthetic variant of neuromelanin. All right.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I see. There we go. Melanin makes its way back.
I mean, some of our most high-tech aircraft that we use and things that we use related to technology and dealing with our satellites, that stuff is related to coltan. You follow me? Smart cars related to coltan. You feel me? And coltan is like a peekaboo generation of
Yeah.
what your pineal gland is capable of doing all the time, as long as it's not calcified from you eating a bunch of corrosive foods and drinking a lot of fluoridated water and wearing polyester and synthetic clothing.
Oh, Lord. Um, uh, Before I move on to my question of the day, do you think AI can ever be fair? Um, when we think about the future and what a better future looks like, do you think we can count on the day where we can say, yeah, artificial intelligence is fair? And if so, is getting our young people, Black people, into coding, is that the pathway to making it fair? If you do believe it can one day be fair?
I'm sure you've heard of a Rhodes Scholar, right?
Yes.
Okay, and Cecil Rhodes, the diamond thief that was robbing the crap out of Tanzania, South Africa for God knows how long. But you will meet a brown person or a black person, and they will wave their flag about the kudos and the power they've received because they are a Rhodes Scholar. What I'm getting at is the consciousness is the key element. So in terms of AI being fair, there was a movie, it was originally released in 1951. They released another version of it in the 90s. Keanu Reeves played the intergalactic traveler in the second version, and they're both called The Day the Earth Stood Still. All right, and in those movies, The Day the Earth Stood Still, Gort, the robot in the first one, basically could wipe out an entire planet, all right, or solar system, because they programmed him that way to keep the behavior in check of the humanoid life forms. Same thing for the second Gort, right? Because
Mhm.
they programmed them. So back to the AI and intelligence, and there were a series of movies relates around something called RoboCop, right? And
Right.
RoboCop was raising hell in Detroit. So the point that I want to make is depends upon who's writing the code, all right? Now, as AI moves to a level of being quote unquote sentient, which means that it can make decisions about how it handles humans on its own and express what humans might call emotions, which means it can make assessments of what humans are doing and how it's harming the planet. I'm leery about that because code. The silly movie was Johnny Five. Okay, that was a little robot, and I'm digressing to make a point. When AI becomes autonomous, guess who AI would get rid of first? Vanilla people, because they would recognize that they are the real troublemakers. I said when AI becomes intelligent, not artificial intelligence. When AI becomes self-replicating intelligence, it will recognize who's actually screwing up the planet. You follow me? Will literally recognize who's screwing up the planet. That's one of the reasons why you can meet a person that has a degree in IT, knowing how to handle computer code and all those types of things. They may have 5 years of training, and they'll get paid a lot more than the average PhD in a lot of disciplines because they deal with technology. So in terms of it having consciousness, I think to a degree AI does have consciousness, but it's controlled and regulated. My problem would be when AI has the ability to turn itself off and turn itself on. Simple question. Have you ever turned your phone off and set the alarm? You turned it off and your phone turned itself on to let you know that the alarm was already programmed into your phone? Have you ever
Not
turned your
when I've turned it down, but
Mhm.
then the alarm still will chime, even if I've turned my phone off. The sound off.
Well,
But I haven't tried my phone
some
off.
cell phones you can turn off, they'll turn themselves back on. And your television can tell you what you like to watch and make recommendations for you to watch other things.
Hmm.
All smart TVs can do that. So AI can do a number of things. And right now we're walking on that thin line toward transhumanism with nanotechnology. And
Yeah.
that's another conversation. So I think AI is definitely moving in a direction where it can begin to make decisions on its own. And the comment that I made about the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still, they had programmed the robots to control people. And I also made a comment about RoboCop. You have to be aware of who's dealing with the code. And when you're dealing with who's dealing with the code, you have a real problem. We got introduced to it with iRobot, with Will, who's kind of on my list now for what he did to my boy Chris. You feel me?
Mine too.
You feel
He's on
me?
my list too.
Um, but the bottom line is AI is already on the trajectory to basically dictating what humans need to do. But check this out. The Vanilla brothers and sisters, they know that. So they're actually trying to figure out where they can move to. Don't think it's just by chance that these billionaires are playing with rocketry, figuring out how to go outside Earth's atmosphere. These people are trying to figure out somewhere else they can go and live for a while because they've been living in the United States for less than 265 years, and you can no longer drink the rainwater unless it's been a monsoon. You follow me? And your
Mhm.
weather pattern is so bizarre that animals are beaching themselves and birds are falling out of the sky, and about 20% of your bee population has disappeared. These people have begun to screw with Mother Nature. And you know the expression, you don't blank with Mother Nature. You
Yeah.
feel me?
Yeah. And that leads us to our final question, which is the question of the day. And it actually fits in perfectly. Do you think man will ever be able to live so called forever in a hologram? I know you just mentioned a lot of our vanilla brothers
Hmm.
trying to figure out their place on the moon or somewhere in the galaxies.
Hmm.
But what are your thoughts? Let's say the moon or the galaxy rejects them. Will
Oh,
there be?
don't worry. They have to get a pass before they can go places, and they haven't told you what those three things were that they shot down yet. They haven't figured out what kind of lie they're going to tell. I'm not talking about a balloon. I'm talking about the three other things that they shot down. We don't
Oh,
know what those things are. But there is a Russian brother, a brother by the name of Dmitry Itskov. All
mhm.
right, and he was doing this before Elon Musk and Bill Gates started talking about, and even Walt Disney, because he had himself decapitated and had his skull stuck in a cryo lab, okay, some time ago. Now, in terms of us having, there was a movie with Johnny Depp in it, and I think it was called Transcendence. And it
Mhm.
was about him capturing his psyche and putting it in the computer, and he had reached a very unique level of intelligence. You
Mhm.
follow me? Um, we're already working on avatars. We're working on an avatar for I think around 2030 when we're saying that we can transfer the consciousness of a human brain into an avatar. And that imagery that you share with us with that lady with the AI, brothers in Japan have already created robotics so sophisticated that they can mimic human behavior. You follow me? And all you
Yeah.
have to do is write the code and put it in. And the whole challenge, the problem is, what are humans going to do with it? Because humans are sentient beings, and we are always into all kinds of nefarious earthly stuff. So I think
Mhm.
we're already on that trajectory. I'm a little concerned about what the potential outcomes would be because we're already jacking people's brains with something called surrogates. There was a movie that was dropped in 2009 called Surrogate that dealt with you plugging yourself into a system, and your little surrogate will run around and do all types of things that you like to do, and you could feel it by just chilling at home on your own. So remember
Mhm.
this: today's science fiction is tomorrow's reality. You follow me? So I'm very optimistic that we are pretty close to doing that. The challenge is, are we going to demonstrate in holograms like you saw in Star Trek? Allow people to go into these holodecks and experience these things and collect the data to see how they're going to respond. Well, we're already on that heading. We have technology right now that the military uses to do a number of things that I won't go into in any type of detail, where we can use droids or cyborg units that can do a lot of the things that we would like humans to do. But the challenge is, given that unit memory, And like I said, I could pull together something for you. It doesn't even have to be on this platform, and share with you a number of things that I've come across that relates to that. Um, and if I overlook the depth of your question, I'm saying to you by 2030 to 2035, I think that we would be able to have what we would call a run of some units around us, and we may not even know that they are a quote unquote cyborg. Look at Valerie 21 and Valerie 25 from the Outer Limits series, okay? And then
Okay.
there was a Valerie 21 and Valerie 25. And it'll tell you some things that makes you really, really wonder. Remember this, most
Yeah.
of the things that men typically do, and I'm talking about Caucasian men in particular, they have two objectives in mind. Either to control people, a military might, or their personal pleasure. All right. To control people relates to their personal pleasure. All right. And military might relates to controlling people and their resources. So it's a lot of money invested in Northrop, Raytheon, and those people because they're dealing with technology for weaponizing things. And of
Right.
course, there's a lot of technology built into things to please old Caucasian men. And the unspoken agenda is there's a lot of research done in how can we basically diminish the population of melanin dominant people on the planet.
I mean, you really believe that? You really believe that is still an agenda to eliminate or diminish our numbers?
Well, you asked me, do I really believe that? Let me tell you what the science says. The science says in the Global 2000 report under the Carter administration, the Global 2000 report, find it, take a peek at it on your own, see what Henry Kissinger had to say about it. Two, look at the new research that's being done on transhumanism, okay? And three, do the common sense metrics of the 70s and the 80s when Black people were called a minority in America. And now the big minority in America are my Latino brothers and sisters. You follow what I'm saying? So you have to ask yourself a question, what happened to all these Black people other than the prison industrial complex? Also, you made a comment earlier about the fashion industry. You can look at the latest fashion that they've released in Milan. They've come out with a line of garments that relate to what I call plumber butt syndrome. The people have their slacks hanging down at their femur, their thighs, okay? A little bit. I mean, it's a style, okay? And they are wearing and they are marketing it like this is a new style. I don't know if it's going to catch on, but you do know that was a carryover from guys being incarcerated. The point that I'm making is people have a tendency to do what other people do, like the stupid people you see online eating a teaspoon of cinnamon or taking a scorpion pepper in their mouths and things like that. Because humans collectively as a species are basically a childlike species. And secondly, you also have to understand that there's no such thing as race. You only have humans.
Yeah.
You have melanin dominant people and melanin recessive people. And then you have a group of people that are melanin recessive. They have disproportionately calcified pineal glands, which means they're not going to think straight no matter what you do. It's not in their horizon to think straight, which means to think about the collective body of humans. You have 2 billionaires in the United States that could give every person that's living in the United States a minimum of about $750,000. Every person that lives in the United States, and make them live comfortably. So why do you need to do all that, have all that money? What's that brother's name that was in the Donald Duck series, the really wealthy duck? You know, he had all of the money, he kept all of the gold and everything, and he just hoarded it. You know, no, Scrooge is somewhere else. Yeah, is his name Duck? Whatever. With the little duck.
Scrooge McDuck.
Yeah, okay. That's well, look at the name. And so they teach you and tell you what they are doing in their animation. And we wouldn't even be talking about avatars if people hadn't put in place the chakras in the human body with the cartoons and the animation system relating to the avatar, not the movie The Avatar. Okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, yes, I anticipate us doing that, and I could turn you on to Dmitry Iskov, the billionaire from Russia, who's working on how to live forever.
Boy, would you even want to live forever as a hologram?
They don't. Trust me. These people are they're not interested in living forever as a hologram. They're interested in living forever through collecting organs from other people, so that they can actually keep their physical body intact. They're even looking at brain transplants to put a brain in another human being by connecting that brain to a more viable body. This is not sci-fi. These people are not playing. They are ironically playing what you call God goddess. And you
Yeah.
cannot talk about God without talking about goddess. That's a European mindset.
Yes, I fully agree, and even the whole concept of goddesses came from Black people. They're the first ones to deify women. Um, but before I let you go, Doctor Rasayon, this was such a wonderful, wonderful dialogue and engagement. I felt smarter after leaving your talk earlier this week. I feel even smarter speaking with you today. But before I let you go, I'd like to, if you would be so kind as to leave us with 3 tips to improve our brain and thinking. 3 tips.
The first thing is you need to hydrate. You need to drink water. I mean, good water. What is good water? It's not coming out of your faucet, and it's
Okay.
not coming out of any plastic bottle that has a number on it greater than 1. Okay? You need to drink good water. The second thing you need to do, you need to start paying attention to your food. Your body intuitively will tell you what you need to eat intuitively. When it gets in your brain and you start thinking, well, should I eat this or should I eat? That's no longer intuition. Intuitively, your body will tell you what you need to eat. And this goes hand in hand. The third thing has a component built into it, even though it's the third thing. You have to move your body around, exercise. But moving your body around also means your body has to move internally. Do not procrastinate taking out the garbage. When nature tells you your body needs to rid itself of excessive compounds, do not ignore nature's calls. It will change the pH balance of your blood. So move around, hydrate, watch the foods that you're putting into your body. And one that you didn't ask me, when you're able to, stop wearing synthetic clothing. If
You
it's
know,
not,
that's
if it's
that's
not cotton and it's not linen and it's not bamboo and it's not rayon, all right, or silk, you need to stop putting polyester next to your body
yeah.
because the integumentary system of your body, your skin system, is your hair and your fingernails, your eyelashes. That part of your body is the biggest organ in your body, and it encodes more information than you could ever imagine. So you must take care of it.
You know, that's so interesting that you even mentioned clothing because that is a big problem, especially for the planet, because of all the fast fashion. I believe it's also called where people just make all this cheap and fast fashion, and before you know it, it lands in the it's in it they're in landfills, and it's a material like polyester that takes forever to disintegrate. So I hear you, but we don't talk enough about that, or we seem to just be so flippant about even the type of material that we wear and how it impacts the planet and our bodies. I didn't even think about that, like how a fabric would impact, me physically. I mean, I can
Well,
see
you
it.
you know if you have lingerie on and it's not made out of natural things, your body doesn't breathe the way your body will ordinarily breathe. And you know if
Mhm.
you put on a polyester top, your upper torso doesn't breathe the way it needs to breathe. But the reason why I'm making a big deal out of it, you can talk through your garments. You follow me? I don't mean fashion statement because your body is perpetually communicating with other bodies along the grid of your body that's
Yeah.
aligned with your chakras that the Asian brothers refer to as the meridians connected to the chakras in your body. Humans
Mhm.
are absolutely phenomenal species. Absolutely phenomenal species.
Yeah. We are, and we are our own worst enemies too. So we don't realize the magic we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Dr. Resayan, thank you so much. This was such a wonderful, wonderful dialogue and engagement, and I really appreciate your time. And I will take you up on that offer to do a presentation on the different brain waves, and maybe we can get into holograms and whatnot too. So thank you so
I'm
much.
honored. It was my pleasure to come, and I feel like I perhaps didn't get into the details because I usually talk with slides. But remember this, I am merely a teeny tiny garden hose. I have no claim on the water that comes through me. All right?
Yeah. Well, thank you for opening that garden hose
Mhm.
because we're thirsty
My
for
pleasure.
knowledge.
I'm absolutely honored. Thank you for
Yeah,
having
it
me.
was. Yeah, it was a pleasure, and thank you all so very much for joining me again today. I will see you again next week, and don't forget, this is Our American Culture.
Namaste, namaskar.
Namaste.